There are other members of the GFM committee here. We have James Robert, Dr. Morag Kerr over there, Robert Forrester, our Secretary, John Finney, MSP and a member of the Justice Committee of the Scottish Parliament. On my immediate left, Professor Alan Page, Professor of Public Law at Dundee University, Patrick Harvey, another MSP and joint convener of the Green Party, is on my right, and playing it outside right is Brian McConaughey, one of Scotland's more experienced members of the senior bar. His presence here is particularly valuable to us all because Brian joined Crown Office as an Advocate Depute in 2002. He became Senior Advocate Depute the following year, and then, more importantly, in 2006 he was appointed Principal Advocate Depute, where he had overall practical responsibility for the prosecution of High Court crime throughout Scotland. You will all have received a copy of the briefing paper, and you know why we have called this conference. We feel very strongly that in the light of the sometimes scandalous outbursts that have come from Crown Office and the Office of the Lord Advocate, they have disqualified themselves from considering the report which Police Scotland will be making following upon their inquiry into the 9 allegations which we first made in September 2012. It is perfectly obvious from these outbursts, which incidentally are unworthy of such a great institution as Crown Office and such a historic post as Lord Advocate, that both the Lord Advocate and Crown Office have already taken a view on the matter, and therefore there is no prospect of that police report being considered fairly and impartially. There is one other matter which I wish to mention. Today we are not considering any other aspect of the Megrahi affair other than that which appears in your briefing sheet. And lastly, and I'm sure I don't require to say this, if you do have a question, would you preface it, please, with your name and a mention of the medium whom you represent? Have we any questions? All breathless, are we? Yes.
Bill Tran, Al Jazeera English. It's about 30 years since Lockerbie happened and Megrahi's long dead, so why does this matter? Why should we care?
That's certainly a matter for discussion, Bill.
Because I think it's an important point that's made, that Lockerbie still does matter. It matters a great deal. Is that the point you're making, Bill?
Yeah.
It does matter. In a world, we live in a world of tragedy, but I think it's wrong to think because a tragedy happened in 1988 that it's not a tragedy. Lockerbie is not irrelevant. Because of the very thing we're here today, it's affected the justice system of Scotland in a great way. And I think that the gentleman you see before you today will speak to that. I feel strongly about it, and I'm wondering actually from here what the panel themselves feel about the principle of what's occurring where this police report will be going to the Crown Office.
John, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I've been a member of the Justice Committee since elected in 2011, and I see my obligation as to be in a position to explain to my constituents how processes work. And to me, this is about process. This is not about personalities. And Justice for Megrahi have posed a series of questions about how the police inquiry will be responded to by Crown Office. 8 entirely reasonable questions, and I suspect had there been replies to these questions that you wouldn't be sitting here today. I'm not in a position to explain to people the process that would be followed. And what I've said to my colleagues in the Justice Committee, a number of whom seem very reticent simply because of the M word, to engage in this, that what we maybe should do is tear the top of the paper off that says Justice for Megrahi and say, what does this mean for the ordinary citizen who makes serious and significant allegations against very senior people who are involved in our criminal justice system? So there is a gap in our process, I would say, and the gap certainly covers this particular case, but it covers potentially any one of the citizens of Scotland.
Alan?
Well, if I could just follow up on that briefly, as John Finney says, public confidence in the administration of criminal justice requires that prosecution decisions be taken free from political or any other form of bias. The issue in this case I see as being not that the allegations of criminal misconduct involve members of the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, because I understand there is a procedure in place to deal with those, but that the allegations themselves have been dismissed out of hand as unfounded, false and misleading, defamatory and so on, which calls into question whether or not the Crown Office is capable of approaching them with the open mind that the administration of criminal justice, in my view, and indeed I think everyone else's view, requires.
Well, yes, I think it's important to reflect on that principle of independence and impartiality. And if this was a press conference seeking to demand one particular outcome of an investigation of a criminal allegation, I wouldn't be sitting here. I think it would be inappropriate for a politician to do that. This is simply about whether an allegation of criminal conduct should be investigated and decisions made on the basis of that investigation by someone who gives every appearance of having made their mind up already. And I think that is something which has wider applicability for people throughout Scotland who may find themselves, for whatever reason, encountering the criminal justice system and want to know that decisions are being made in a fair and impartial manner. And I think that's the simple core of the argument that's being put today.
Brian?
I suspect everybody's probably said what I would say, which is that I think the two things are, firstly, in relation to this particular matter, where we know that Crown Office and the Lord Advocate have expressed what would appear to be a concluded view about the matter. And that perhaps is simply symptomatic of the fact that Crown Office these days seem to consider it to be part of their job to pronounce in relation to pretty much any case with any profile at all. But the difficulty here, and I suspect it's not really a controversial statement, is that if the Lord Advocate has expressed what would appear to be a concluded view about a matter, it is very difficult to see any way in which justice can be done, or perhaps more importantly be seen to be done, if the person who is deciding whether or not there are to be proceedings is the person who has already told us that the allegations are defamatory, unfounded, false and misleading.
Did that deal with your question, Bill?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
John.
It's George Thompson. I'm with Bill. I'm with Al Jazeera English. In view of what you just said there, Brian, would it ever be possible for the Megrahi, for the allegations case to be considered by Crown and prosecuted while the Lord Advocate remains in post?
I don't think that the current allegations, whatever their merit or otherwise, can be considered by Crown Office having regards to the statements that have been made. I suspect that the only way of resolving that issue is to consider whether perhaps somebody from another jurisdiction could be asked to actually consider the matter, as has been done in exceptional circumstances in the past.
Greg Russell from The National. Given that nobody appears to be listening to you thus far, how confident are you that you will get a result in the end?
Do we want to deal with that question? Or is that something for another occasion? I was rather anxious to stick to the matter which is in the briefing paper on the basis that the members of the panel sitting beside me here have been briefed on that, and at no time had we indicated to them that there may be other questions to be raised. I certainly would refute the fact that we haven't been listened to thus far. We have not yet achieved what Justice for Megrahi seeks at the end of the day, which is an inquiry into the whole affair. But I wouldn't quite put it that nobody has listened to us. Our petition has been before the Scottish Parliament for in excess of 2 years, I think, John?
Considerable.
Being considered by the Justice Committee. I don't think there's anything else I want to add to that.
I may have misheard the question, but I think I can give a partial answer to it, which is to simply say that the issue of the handling of the police report is one of some urgency. And what is lacking at the moment is a clear statement of how the requirements of justice will be served in relation to the handling of that report. It's that which is urgent and which needs to be addressed in the near to short-term future.
Incidentally, when the allegations were first made to the then Secretary, the Justice Secretary, who was Kenny McCaskill, it was my anticipation that he would refer them, for example, to the Attorney General for Northern Ireland, and then we wouldn't have had the kind of bother that we're having just now, because it struck me as being utterly absurd that since our allegations were, amongst others, made against Dumfries and Galloway, members of Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, Mr McCaskill invited us to send our report to the Chief Constable of Dumfries and Galloway, Custodes. John, were you going to add to that?
I think it's important to say, after the initial inappropriate comments from various quarters about the very serious accusations that were made, that are of great importance to the public and are made by people of impeccable background, that Police Scotland subsequently pick up the issue. And it's certainly my understanding, I'm not a member of Justice for Megrahi, that they're very content with the manner in which that's been conducted. There's been a departure from normal procedure in any case in relation to that inquiry, because that inquiry has been supported by independent counsel. So, whilst it's the broader issue of how these matters are dealt with, then that's yet another departure regarding the manner in which a case involving, where Mr Megrahi has been associated with has been dealt with, because of course the initial trial was a significant departure. And it's to say that there are opportunities to look at things different ways, but we are at a crucial time now, because the police inquiry ultimately will be reported to Crown Office, and that's when the issues of concern obviously will surface.
Yes, it's a bit daft. The Lord Advocate has suggested that he would call in somebody who hasn't dealt with Lockerbie before to have a look. So he has obviously conceded the fact that he himself should have nothing to do with it. And of course, the extension of our argument is that since he is the boss of the outfit, nobody else in the outfit really is qualified to deal with it at all.
Len, could I ask the panel to their views on whether, given what you've just described, there is a role for the Scottish Parliament or the Scottish Government to be engaged in this, if the Lord Advocate is actually failing to carry out his duties in a way that would make justice not only be done, but be seen to be done? Does the panel have a view on whether or not the Parliament and the Scottish Government should be more involved with this than they are?
Well, the Lord Advocate is accountable to the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Parliament can call him to account. The impression you get reading some of the correspondence is of an institution, a body, that is to say the Crown Office, which is impatient of, resistant to public scrutiny, dismissive of public scrutiny. And all that is required is for the questions that have been raised about how is this matter going to be dealt with in an appropriately independent manner. All that is required is for those questions to be addressed. And that is what is lacking, a clear statement of how exactly the police report will be dealt with.
Brian, do you want to?
Well, I think it would be a fairly exceptional procedure for the government to become involved in this. However, the circumstances themselves are reasonably exceptional in the sense that I think prior to this, it's certainly unheard of in my experience for a serving law officer to make statements of the nature that we have in this particular investigation in relation to a matter which is the subject of police inquiry. And for that reason, if no other, then I think the Parliament may have a duty to step in and try and direct proceedings in a manner that ensures that satisfaction is achieved in relation to the requirement of justice being done.
Robert.
Yes, Mr. McCarthy, you mentioned earlier that there have been instances where cases have been referred to another jurisdiction because of various complications. I wonder if you could possibly cite examples of that.
The instances are slightly different in the sense of the people were not, or in fact it was the same person that I was thinking of, was not invited to consider the issue about whether or not there should be a prosecution. But in 2000, Lord Justice Campbell, who was a senior judge in Northern Ireland, chaired an inquiry into the decision-making process in the prosecution of 3 men accused of the murder of Surjit Singh Chokar. And in 2008, he led the public inquiry arising from the trial of Shirley McKee. And he had no connection to Scotland. And the whole point was that because of the particular issues involved in those cases, that it was not appropriate for someone within this jurisdiction to deal with them.
So on that basis, you wouldn't regard it as particularly exceptional if this were to go to an outside?
If I can only think of 2 particular instances in the past 100 years, I suppose it's pretty exceptional. But that being so, the circumstances here are sufficiently exceptional. And I don't think it could be too difficult to find someone from England, from Ireland, wherever it may be, to consider the matter and to give a view as to whether or not proceedings should be commenced or not.
Thank you.
I just heard someone mention that the English jurisdiction might be an appropriate way forward to have this looked at in an impartial manner. But considering that the English police were involved quite heavily in the original Lockerbie investigation, and that in fact some of the allegations bear quite heavily on the conduct of the English part of the Lockerbie investigation, is it actually still appropriate to consider an English arbiter as being a suitable way forward for this?
I wonder, Chair, if I could say, it certainly would be my view that the jurisdiction or the nationality of the individual concerned wouldn't be an issue. I mean, anyone of integrity, it's important we'd have someone of integrity to look at this. And it does highlight one of the problems we have as a relatively small nation. It occurs with complaints about the police and who investigates that, and it also, Crown Office Protector Fiscal Services is a relatively small group of people. So, for instance, in one of the responses, and there's been a big lead-up to us being here with the Justice Committee considering this petition on many, many occasions, still awaiting replies to the 8 questions reasonably posed by the Justice for Megrahi group, but the Lord Advocate suggested an individual who could act as impartial. Well, the individual, it transpires, couldn't be impartial because they had previously determined a matter regarding a complaint regarding the Justice for Megrahi case. And that's part of the challenge there is. There probably isn't the number of people suitable. So I certainly don't think, the nationality or necessarily, but what we need, the jurisdiction is important, but what we need is someone out with that immediate, rather small group of individuals.
Yeah.
Hello, John Davison from Xara News. Mr Finney's already mentioned that the Police of Scotland have got an independent council working with them on this. Speaking as a mere Englishman, could you give us some idea of what the significance of that is and how rare that is in the general police business in Scotland?
Sorry?
Could you give us some idea of what the significance of that is or how rare that is? Yeah?
Well, in my experience, which stretches over a number of years, I've never come across that situation before. John, of course, is a former police officer. He'll be able to tell us about his experience.
Well, certainly, I wasn't dealing with that level of issue, but it's certainly unprecedented, and again, it's a departure from the norm that suggests that dealing with a unique set of circumstances doesn't mean that you can't be flexible with the way you go about things, and it's certainly not the norm for a significant inquiry team from a police force to have independent counsel support it, and that's the case in this instance, and there's no suggestion otherwise than that's a helpful contribution to the detailed inquiry that has to take place.
Brian, have you ever come across anything of that sort?
I have not.
I think that amongst us we probably aggregate something like 150 years of experience.
Could I make
we may have the answer there.
Could I make the point, Mr. Chairman, that I think that the behaviour of Police Scotland has been exemplary in this matter since it started.
Absolutely.
They have taken this view from the very start that this should be, because Lockerbie is so central to justice in Scotland, that they should take a totally independent approach to this. And certainly in my police experience, again, it's unprecedented to bring in an independent QC. And I think it needs to be noted and marked that Police Scotland have dealt with this, and it should be dealt with. All that's being asked now is that the Lord Advocate and the Scottish Government to quite deal with it equally well.
Yeah. Incidentally, Bill, may I come back to your very first question? And I wasn't, as you saw, seeking discussion on that, but it does occur to me that miscarriage of justice does not become anything less of a miscarriage with the passage of time. Any other questions? Yes, Bill.
If things go your way, so to speak, how would it unfold going forward now? What are the step-by-step process winds up with whatever?
At the moment, Police Scotland are putting together their report on Operation Sandwood. Normally, that report would go to the Crown Office, where it would be considered. It would be considered, no doubt, by one of the law officers, or certainly somebody very senior. We want to beat them to it, as it were, and instead of the report going straight to Crown Office, we want it referred to someone else to consider and report upon. I think inevitably it would have to go to Crown Office thereafter.
Yeah, well, I presume if a decision was taken that there were to be proceedings of any sort, then they would be run by Crown Office.
And if the independent body, whoever that may be, advised no proceedings, then presumably that would be the end of the matter.
But you would be confident that the matter had been properly handled. Yes.
Sorry?
But you would be confident that the matter had been properly handled.
Dr. Swire.
Dr. Jim Swire, yes.
Sorry, Jim, I didn't mention you at the very start. You were
I was not miffed, not at all. I was going to ask, it appears to be the opinion of the panel that the Crown Office have essentially ruled themselves out by their intemperate and precipitate comments about the allegations that were lodged specifically against them. If that is the case, what else can be done by Lockerbie relatives who seek only to know the truth about why their loved ones were killed and why they were not protected? What other options are open, preferably within Scotland initially, to replace what would normally have been the Office of the Lord Advocate in this extraordinary circumstance where that office finds itself in the firing line? Is there an ombudsman, for instance, within Scotland that we could apply to?
Alan, any views?
There is indeed a Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. If my memory serves me correctly, matters relating to criminal proceedings are excluded from the Ombudsman's jurisdiction. I'm reasonably confident that is the case. So that is not an option. There is a police investigation.
I don't think that would fall within the remit of the police investigation. The perk, the reporting commissioner. But the other thing I think it's important to say is, and it's been said throughout there, this is about public confidence in our entire criminal justice system. And I would have thought that that's something that the entire structure would wish to encourage. It can't be. There can't be in any doubt, some of the individuals, that confidence at the moment is lacking. And it may or may not be about individuals, but we still need to understand the process. So this isn't about casting aspirations on the entire Crown Office, Procurator, fiscal staff. It is about understanding a process that this matter can be dealt with and enjoy public confidence. Because if it's a credible person that's tasked with doing that task, then it's not for me to speak for Justice Megrahi, but I certainly would respect the decision they came up with.
Could I just add to my previous question, Chairman, if I may? It does seem to me that the possession of a trusted prosecution system is crucial to any community. And I don't want to tread on any political toes about independence or lack of it. But if there is any prospect of independence for Scotland, this issue must be magnified still further, because never would there be a time when we'd be more in need of a trusted prosecutorial system than perhaps we are at the moment.
Yeah. Any further questions?
Gentleman there with the glasses.
So, Paul Ward from the Press Association. Just wondering, is there any specific comments from the Crown Office or the Lord Advocate, or is it just a kind of general attitude to the investigation that you're concerned about?
Well, "12 days after we lodged the original allegations, the Scotsman newspaper published a response from the Crown Office in which we were pilloried for having made defamatory and entirely unfounded, deliberately false and misleading allegations. I wondered when I first read that just how defamatory a statement can be. It went on to suggest that we had accused police officers of fabricating evidence. And that, to my mind, was both ill-tempered and quite scandalous coming from an institution like the Crown Office, particularly when the comments had no foundation in fact whatsoever. And to make matters worse, if that were possible, on the 21st of December 2012, the Scotland edition of the Times carried an interview given by the Lord Advocate to Magnus Linklater. Not only did he, with a total disregard for the facts, repeat those scurrilous outpourings from Crown Office, but he went on to add that we had levelled criminal accusations against the judges and the Lord Advocate of the day. We had done no such thing. I think that's enough to be going on with.
Should the Lord Advocate resign if he's overstepped the mark by so much? Should he not just, don't you think he should resign?
Well, my thought right at the start was that he should be seriously considering his position. I don't know whether he ever did or not.
Well, for Mr McConaughey, perhaps, your knowledge of precedent, I mean, can you recall a Lord Advocate being so intemperate about, as it were, a live case?
Those are things that should never have been said by a Lord Advocate. And I do hope that we never see that kind of outburst again from a future Lord Advocate.
But is it unprecedented?
I have never come across that before.
It was a Fairbairn case many years ago, early 80s, who resigned. Did he resign over statements he made in the House of Commons?
Oh, yes.
The Glasgow rape case.
It was Nicholas Fairbairn actually spoke to the Daily Mail before he spoke to the House of Commons. And the view was taken that the information that he gave to the Mail should have first been given in the House, and his resignation followed.
His position seems, from your point of view, fairly untenable in this case.
The Lord Advocate's position, I think it's totally untenable.
So should he resign?
It's a matter for him.
Just to add a little bit to this, I was particularly incensed when this outburst appeared in the paper, because part of the complaint was that the Lord Advocate pointed out that the place to deal with our concerns about the conviction was in a court of law, and that it was wholly improper for us to be rushing to the public press to express our reservations about the conviction. Now, we had sent a private and confidential letter to the Justice Secretary that we had not approached the press at all. It was, in fact, the Crown Office and the Lord Advocate who approached the press with making allegations against us, which were in fact defamatory, saying that we had made allegations that we had not done, and so on. So the person trying to conduct this argument in the press was in fact the Lord Advocate and the Crown Office, whereas what we were trying to do was to bring the matter to a court of law.
A very valid point, very well made, if I may say so, Warwick. You know, I hate to say it, but England does it better than we do, in that they have a DPP and an Attorney General. Two hats, and we only have the one hat in the Lord Advocate. Brian, what's your view on that matter? Sorry to spring it on you.
That's okay. I think a similar system to what they have in England with the DPP would be useful up here. I think, however, as a generality, the system works reasonably well. In fact, probably works pretty well in terms of decisions that are taken. And these are exceptional circumstances. It was an exceptional, in my opinion, outburst by the Lord Advocate, and generally speaking, these sort of things do not happen. I think the question was asked was whether this was something that I'd ever experienced before, and the answer is no. I'm unaware of any Lord Advocate making such a public statement about a current investigation by the police. And I do think that, unfortunately, it is part of the system that we now seem to have, that Crown Office are keen to become involved in that sort of media relations.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our members of the Scottish Parliament, Patrick and John, require to leave us because the Parliament is about to take a vote. John, Patrick, thank you very much indeed for your presence today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In our view, the Lockerbie case has been going on for so long now that it is almost impossible to identify anybody who is working within Crown Office who will not have had some level of engagement with the case. And that's why, in our view, to quote what Brian McConaughey said, it's not just about justice being done, it's about it being seen to be done. That's why, in our view, the case should be considered by a prosecution entirely with the Crown Office jurisdiction.
Well, I think there might be a more important objection, if you like, to that as an idea, that the Crown agent, so far as I am aware, will be very, very unlikely to have considered the marking of a High Court prosecution in her life. So the idea that she is going to be put in the position of considering it in a situation like this seems quite preposterous to me.
I think it's important as well to realise there are two police investigations at the moment. One is an official Crown Office investigation, which in fact deems Mr Megrahi to be guilty, and it's looking for accomplices. On the other hand, we have Operation Sandwood into 9 criminal allegations. Now, if any of these allegations are actually proven, then it's arguable that Mr Megrahi was innocent. So we have this conflict. The Lord Advocate is astride two inquiries, one which says he's guilty and one which potentially says he's not guilty. I fail to see how there's any degree of independence can come into an assessment by the Crown Crown Office of that situation. It's an unprecedented in many ways, and this is another where you've got two inquiries going on into the same incident, if you like, and I think it's quite clear that it's completely untenable, and the Lord Advocate needs to step right back, the Crown Office needs to step right back and let these two inquiries reach their own conclusions.
Yes, we have two inquiries going in opposite directions. It seems quite absurd, doesn't it? Well, had you going to say something, Mike?
Well, I was just going to underline what James said there about the two inquiries with conflicting premises. The Crown Office inquiry that we hear so much about, which has never been a closed case, that it doesn't rule out the possibility of further prosecutions, that is completely predicated on the absolutely certain assumption that Megrahi was guilty and that indeed the bomb was placed on board the plane at Malta. Now, the Operation Sandwood inquiry is looking at entirely different premises. It's looking at premises which question this mantra. And it's perfectly clear that the Lord Advocate and the Crown Office have entirely closed minds and closed ears to any suggestion that there were faults in the original inquiry, which, for example, misidentified the route of the bomb suitcase, misidentified the scene of the crime, and misidentified other evidence. And when your allegations are based on such a fundamental challenge to the official version of what happened, then in my mind, the chances of anyone within the Crown Office prosecutorial service considering this with an open mind are not good.
Thank you very much, Morag. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. And may I express my own thanks to the remaining panel members, Brian McConaughey, Alan, having come from Dundee. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.